I am Mariana, and I am 40 years old. I work as a medical assistant. I have been married for 12 years now and have two children, a third grader and a first grader. John, my husband, came to visit me in hospital to do his sales pitch. Every time John came to my house, his sales, I was the one who handled first. We were on a basis of just talking, but then when we found out that we had more in common than just business, things started to get interesting. After having dinner together several times, we started dating. And after 3 years, we got married. John is very bright, well-spoken, and good at communicating. He even frequently says it himself, that working in sales was his calling. To be honest, John wasn't really my type physically, but somehow we fell in love with each other. 15 years ago, after our children were asleep, John and I would stay up late, talking. Our conversations often lasted for several hours without us realizing how much time had passed. Our two children, Patrick and Katie, have grown up very well, and perhaps because they're like my husband, they both talk every day in a very lively way. I think we are a typical family. John is also very active with doing chores.
Tonight, dinner is steak. Do look forward to it.
John sometimes tells us what he's cooking for dinner, but Patrick and Katie are always excited to go to school. John wasn't a cook from the beginning, couldn't cook at all when we first met. But I soon discovered that his cooking repertoire had grown, and I was amazed. The reason why my husband is cooking is that I am not able to be home. My mother is in the hospital, and I every day after work.
At first, I would come home early for dinner, but one day, John said, "I'll cook dinner, and you can leave the kids with me. Don't worry about the family." Oh, so you go visit and stay with your...
I was so happy that I cried to hear words. From that day onwards, I would try and finish preparing breakfast and doing as many household chores as possible before going to work and seeing the children off to school. My husband would come home from work and prepare dinner, take care of the children, and watched over our homework in the evenings. My mother has had a chronic illness for a long time and has been frequently in and out of the hospital for the past 3 years. She hasn't been doing so well lately. She's been in the hospital for quite some time now. To be honest, I don't know what will happen in the near future. So I come here every day to calm myself down from anxieties. I lost my father in an accident when I was very young. Since I was an only child, I have her with my mother till marrying John. My mother was a very smart person who worked in the same medical office as me, but she started investing in stocks with the inheritance of my father and became quite successful. My mother bought an apartment when I was going to elementary school. It was a large apartment, more than enough for 2 people in a fairly convenient location, and probably expensive when I first rented it. Thanks to my mother, I was able to private high school and private coal. She raised me without any troubles, inconvenience. When my mother was temporarily discharged from the hospital, she repeatedly told me that she wanted to live with me. However, she said no, possibly out of concern for my husband and son.
She would say, "It's okay. You worry too much. I'm way better than you think, Marion."
She would always tell me that she wanted me to stay with them. Fortunately, my mother was able to perform daily activities by herself, not need any nursing care. However, I was still anxious about when to see her every day, even while discharged from the hospital. Since I have to work, I can only visit at night once weekdays, so I have my aunt and my mother during the day. My Aunt Michelle is single and has running a small restaurant since Bet born. Since I was a little girl, I often ate dinner with my mother at my Aunt Michelle's restaurant. And when I was away at work, Aunt Michelle would always take care of me. When I was in my rebellious phase, I used to fight with my mother and then go to my Aunt Michelle's place to calm down. I remember well that when Aunt Mice talked over the food, she cooked. I forgot what I was angry about. So I believe that I was raised by my and Aunt Michelle. All the food is delicious, and as regular customers have been coming since I was a little girl. Even after I got married, my family still goes to eat at Aunt Michelle's restaurant. Then one day, that day I went to visit my mother before visiting hours and returned. It was quite late, but I found my mother-in-law was still at our place. The children were still awake, and they were relaxing in the living room.
Oh my, Mariana. Welcome back. Were you visiting your mother at the again today? You must be weary for having such a day.
My in-law's house is about a 5-minute drive from ours. My mother-in-law, Rachel, doesn't mean to be difficult, but she has a stubborn streak that makes it harder for me to get along with her. Once she says something, she has to do it her way and be stubborn about it. When Rachel comes to our house, is usually when she wants money. My father-in-law, Craig, is still working very hard, and we are nowhere near being done yet. For the past few years, Rachel has had to send $500 a month for living expenses. But for the past few months, she often comes to our house asking for more money. She says she's in need. Today, Rachel said she came to see her grandchildren, but I think she probably came for the money.
After making sure the kids are in bed asleep, Rachel said, "I'm sorry. I'm short of money again this month. Can you just give me a little more?"
Again this month. We have been giving you money for one expenses every month now. My father is still working. So what are you spending all that money on?
Don't be so angry. I'm getting old, and I have to pay for hospital bills. You're telling me not to go to your father's salary is going down the recession.
John would nag her every time she has money, but Rachel would never back. I have seen this exchange many times where my mother-in-law makes an excuse and doesn't leave until we give her the money. I calmed my angry husband down, and Rachel said she had just found my wallet.
After giving her the money, my husband asked me to take a bath. So I went out for a walk around the block, and he said, "Thank you, ma'am. You're always so supportive. By the way, how is your mother?"
She asked curiously.
It was the first time ever Rachel had me about my mother. I wondered why. Ask me such a question when she hard visited her before. But I replied, "The doctors have told me that this stay is going to be a long one."
Answered.
Then my mother-in-law said, "Oh, what will happen to your inheritance?"
She asked bluntly. I was surprised at her sudden questioned her back.
What? Inheritance? What do you mean?
Well, I was just wondering if you had any conversations with your mother about this. I believe that your mother has a sister, right? I think you should talk to your mom this matter now, before it's too late. After your mother passes away, do you want to have any trouble with your inheritance?
Rachel's words made me angry, so I told her, "Don't worry. My aunt and I don't have that kind of relationship that would cause trouble."
I replied simply. A few weeks later, John, who had 3 children at his parents' house for holiday, he came home in a panic.
Mariana, my mother bought a mansion
Near my workplace, a mansion is under construction. Since we lived in the countryside, the mansion was very conspicuous. Whenever we passed by the mansion construction site, my husband, and I often wondered who would live in such a place.
Where would she get that kind of money?
I asked him in surprise.
I have no idea. I questioned her a lot, but she never answered. Maybe she's relying on my father's money?
John said this as he wondered.
If Rachel doesn't have enough money for the mansion, do we still need to give her any money for expenses?
That's right. If she can afford to live in a mansion, she has enough money for her living expenses.
We were very angry and irritated because we thought Rachel was in need of money, but she had been given it by someone else. If Rachel has enough money to pay for the mansion, it would be a lie to say that she doesn't have enough money for living expenses. John and I have decided that we won't give her any more money no matter what happens in the future. Supposedly, her mortgage and deposit have been approved, and the house will be completed in 6 months. Rachel told John that she was very excited about living in a mansion in her old age. 1 month after our conversation, my mother has passed away. I was quite shocked because she looked and healthy when I went to visit her before. It was a blessing in disguise that a call while I was at work that Mai was in critical condition, so I was able to leave work early and rush to the hospital to take her in her final hours. She may have been waiting for me to... She passed away soon after I arrived.
Maybe she was waiting for you, Mariana.
Aunt Michelle, who arrived earlier to this, while I broke down and cried or spot. There was more to do at the wake than I had expected, and I did not have to grieve. After seeing my mother off safely and returning home, I lost my strength and broke into tears, and my children came to console me. After the funeral, I spent the rest day being very busy cleaning up my house. As I was cleaning up with Aunt Mice, found many things with memories, and remembering them, I couldn't stop crying again. While I was being busy cleaning up, helped me with the household chores, care of the children for me. Since he was very busy at work too, thank him enough and be grateful of. The children were very sweet with me and cared for my feelings. Patrick tried his best to tell me funny stories from school to make me laugh. Katie showed me that she got an A to make me happy. I cried a lot after my mother passed away, but John, Patrick, Katie, and Aunt took good care of me and supported me. Then, 3 days after the funeral, when I returned home from cleaning my mother's house, Rachel was at our home again.
As soon as she saw me back at home, abruptly said, "When will you get the payment is due soon."
Deposit? Payment? What are you talking about?
I asked her back.
I am talking about your inheritance. You got a lot of money, didn't you?
I renounced my inheritance.
Are you kidding me?
Rachel said this in surprise, with a voice which echoed throughout them. I found out after my mother passed, my mother's inheritance was nearly dollars. My mother had told me that she wanted my aunt to split it 50-50. However, my mother often talked about it with me.
She would say, if anything should me, please take care of Michelle. I hope Michelle would renovate her with my inheritance.
Oh, mother! Don't say something so ominous.
We often had this kind of conversation. Even the day before she passed away, my mother was worried about my aunt's restaurant.
Are there any customers coming to restaurant? She mentioned something about the axe breaker again, so I'm worried.
Aunt Michelle's restaurant was built, so it was quite old, and my mother had often suggested to her that she should renovate the restaurant for her, but she always refused. She said she felt bad about spending her mother's money and also didn't want to take a break from running the restaurant while it was being renovated. Aunt Michelle has managed to keep the restaurant running, but recently the building has been deteriorating and there are many repairs that need to be made. Aunt Michelle once told me that many of her regulars have been coming to her restaurant for many years, but she has a hard time attracting new customers. Since I have been a customer of my restaurant for many years, to continue to run the restaurant long as she can. Aunt Michelle, who has always prioritized work over spending money on restaurants, is now cutting back on her own living expenses. She lived on the second floor of the restaurant, where she had been living quite frugally, to the point that I would always find her sitting in front of a small table with a cup of tea and a piece of bread. I believe that the cost of ingredients for her restaurant has gone up, but she hardly raised the prices on the menu she served to her customers. I have a husband, and we both work. We are not wealthy by any means, but not in need for money. Even if I received a large sum of money, I would have no use for it. So I want to renounce my inheritance and ask that it be given to someone who needs it more than me. Aunt Michelle initially refused, but after hearing that my mother had been worried about her just the day before she passed away, Aunt Michelle agreed to accept. I talked to my husband about it and with my wishes. John and I had often gone to my aunt's restaurant since we were dating. The food was so good that we often talked about how we wished she had more cuisine. When I told Rachel about my inheritance, she spoke to me angrily.
Why would you do such thing without consent? How should I pay off for my mansion?
Your mansion? What are you talking about? I thought you'd already paid for the mansion?
John asked Rachel. Rachel said vigorously,
There's only a week left until the payment is due. I've been waiting for your inheritance to come through.
I could not forgive Rachel's statement that she had bought the mansion with her inheritance from my mother.
What did you just say? Don't you dare mock my mother. Even if we get the inheritance, why pay for your mansion?
I think this was the first time I had spoken back so strongly to my mother. I was so angry that I started to cry.
Of course, you should pay for my mansion because I'm your mother. You wanted her inheritance so much, Mother, that you neglected your own went to visit her, didn't you?
Rachel retorted.
What a horrible thing to say. I had no intention of that. My mother didn't wish for such thing. Please, just leave.
I was only worried about my mother, but she never started a conversation about it with me. Instead, I just wished and wanted Mai to live as long as possible. Coming to us for money is still fine. Mother's legacy has nothing to do, Rachel.
Hey, Mom, that is just so rude. Mariana didn't even have that kind in her head. What did you do for Mariana's mother? You hardly even went to visit her. I'm very disappointed in you, Mother. Please go home already. We won't be supporting your living at all from now on.
As John said in a strong tone, you terrible things to your parents. You both are such horrible children. I'm leaving.
After she said this, she left our home.
After Rachel left, John said, I'm about my mother. I had no idea what she was thinking. You don't have to worry about her.
He said this as he apologizes. John later told me that because of age, she had shortened the term of and agreed to a higher down payment. Since from that day, Rachel contacted every day to somehow lend her money, stubbornly refused. Since Rachel's demands were so insistent, John talked to his father, Jeff, and when he did, Jeff and Rachel came to apologize. Jeff had no idea what was going on. He knew that they were going to buy mansion, but Jeff thought they would pay for it from their savings. Jeff also had no idea that John had been giving Rachel money for living, and that Rachel had been coming back for more than we had already given. I was surprised to hear from Jeff that he had told me that she's going to our house because since I'm away from home to take care of my mother who is in the hospital, Rachel will help us with the house chores, which she never did before. Jeff said that he had left the money management to Rachel and he didn't know how much money she had saved, but he was surprised to find that it wasn't enough. When Jeff questioned Rachel, she confessed that she had made poor investment choices which resulted in her losing some money. Jeff deeply apologized to John and
Mariana, I apologize for my wife's behavior. I believe Rachel did the worst thing she could have done as an adult. We will take care of the money for mansion. so please forget about it. I will make sure she will pay back you both have given her, even though be paid little by little over time. Rachel, you apologize to them too.
I'm sorry. I will pay back.
Rachel apologized in a small voice for the vigor she had shown earlier.
I understand. If you apologized, it's all right.
I said. Seeing my mother-in-law becoming smaller, I felt refreshed. In the end, Rachel didn't have enough money for the down payment on the mansion, so she tried to get a new loan, but it was denied since Rachel had already called in out of her current house and had Rachel and Jeff decided to move into smaller apartment with a lower rent. Rachel had been a stay-at-home mom who'd never worked, but she started working part-time to pay us back. I took my family to Aunt Michelle's restaurant for dinner. Aunt Michelle told us that there was a lot of land available just around the corner, so she decided to build the new restaurant there.
I will not renovate, but build the restaurant at the new location so I will be able to eat at my place
she said happily. She gave us a taste of the new dish plans to serve on the new menu after relocation. After the relocation, Aunt Michelle and the house where my mother used, the new restaurant will be completed year. We are looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. If anything happens to you guys, you can count on me.
She said this to us with a serious, her cooking is always delicious. It's the same taste I've had since childhood. Katie and Patrick both like it and happy. I think my mother is smiling at us from heaven when we eat and enjoy Michelle's food together as a family.